Okay, but I mean, I just can't stop thinking about the sheer audacity of this opening quote.
Oh, yeah, it's intense.
Just listen to this, straight from the text of this viral internet manifesto we were looking at today. Quote, "The porn epidemic among Christians will end once women lose weight and fuck men to the point men won't seek it."
I mean, it is literally a textual hand grenade. He
Yeah.
pulls the pin and throws it right into the middle of the internet.
Can you even imagine hitting send on a manifesto that starts like that? Like, the author actually details the explosion that followed, and the fallout is just wild.
Right.
He was labeled a misogynist, a massive porn addict, and some commenters literally called him Lucifer, which, honestly, reading through his reactions, he kind of seemed to view as a badge of honor.
Yeah, well, what is genuinely fascinating from a sociological perspective is the coalition that formed against him. Because you suddenly had outraged modern feminists, trans activists, and tradcon Christian mommy bloggers.
Demographics that traditionally are at each other's throats.
Exactly. All uniting into this massive enraged mob to come after him. A single sentence managed to unify entirely opposite ends of the cultural spectrum.
Because it pokes at something so raw, you know? And when a single statement unites the entire internet in fury, you really have to look at what is underneath it. And just to be completely clear for you listening, our mission here isn't to, like, validate this guy's worldview, nor are we here to condemn him.
Right. We are operating strictly as analysts today. We want to understand the architecture of this highly controversial, unfiltered red pill critique.
Yeah.
We're going to unpack how the author connects these really explosive ideas about modern dating, religion, and gender dynamics, and figure out the structural argument he is actually building beneath all the shock value.
So let's start with the foundation, because to understand why the author claims the modern dating world is fundamentally broken, you have to look at his baseline assumptions about human biology.
Yep.
The whole argument basically rests on this idea of a massive, unbridgeable biological imbalance between the sexes.
Right. The central thesis is that women, by their very evolutionary nature, have a mere fraction of the sex drive that men do.
A fraction.
Yeah. And he doesn't just make the philosophical claim. He pulls in specific data points to construct this framework. For instance, he points to historical genetic studies showing that throughout the entirety of human history, only 25 to 40% of men actually passed on their genes.
Wow.
Compared to a full 80% of women.
Wait, I have to push back on the math of this for a second. If historically only 25% of men passed on their genes, but 80% of women did, those women were having sex. Like, they were actively reproducing.
They were.
So how does the author reconcile women supposedly having this staggeringly low sex drive with the fact that they were successfully reproducing at such massive rates compared to men? Is it just a chore?
Well, yeah, essentially, because the author makes a really sharp distinction between genuine physical desire and transactional survival. The text argues that for most of human history, women viewed sex as a necessary chore. It wasn't driven by an insatiable biological lust. It was a mechanism to secure resources, protection, and stability from that top tier of men capable of providing it.
So it's purely pragmatic.
Exactly. The author is arguing that modern men need to accept that a woman's baseline physical interest in them is almost non-existent unless they have a very specific elite threshold.
So historically speaking, the vast majority of men were just evolutionary dead ends, just totally invisible to women.
Completely invisible. And the text pulls this dynamic directly into the modern digital era to prove it hasn't changed. He actually cites that infamous Cupid study.
Oh, remember that one?
Right. The one which revealed that women rate 80% of men on the platform as quote-unquote unattractive.
80%.
The data suggested women essentially view the vast majority of the male population as below average. He even brings up sex frequency studies showing that gay men have 6.5 times more sex than lesbians.
So basically arguing that when you remove female selectivity from the equation entirely, the male sex drive just naturally skyrockets into the stratosphere.
Yep. The mechanism driving this, according to the author, is that women are the ultimate gatekeepers of intimacy. When men are left to their own devices, the pursuit of sex is constant. When women are left to theirs, it plummets.
Which leads to how the text demands we strip away all the romanticization we've built up around dating. Like, the author insists that everyone, men and women alike, are quite literally sex objects.
Yeah, that term triggers a lot of people.
Oh, people get so incredibly offended by that term because society conditions us to view being a sex object as deeply degrading.
It feels reductive to people. Like, it feels like you are stripping away their humanity.
But the author's logic is brutally physical. He argues that sex is a physical act occurring between two physical bodies in physical space.
Right.
You cannot physically have sex with a personality. You can fall in love with a personality, sure, but the physical act requires a physical object. And if you are offended by being a physical object, the text argues you are simply living in denial of biological reality.
That's a harsh way to frame it.
It's like going to a restaurant and trying to eat the menu instead of the meal. The personality, the jokes, the shared interests, that's the menu. But the physical body is the actual food. And the text is demanding what he know, that when it comes to the act of sex, we are all just looking for the meal.
Which, when you look at this through the lens of evolutionary psychology, leads to the next logical question the text tackles, which is adaptation.
Right.
If women are biologically this hyper-selective, viewing 80% of guys as completely unappealing, how do average men survive in a landscape that hostile?
The author claims men basically fracture into two entirely different survival strategies. The first one is what the text calls sneaky fucker game.
Sneaky fucker game, yeah.
Or, if you spend any time on the modern internet, being a simp.
The simp strategy is essentially an evolutionary workaround. This is the average guy who realizes he cannot compete on pure physical attraction or dominant social status, so he attempts to win through sheer obedience and ideological compliance.
He plays the ultimate nice guy. But the text doesn't just call these guys pathetic, it calls them manipulative.
Highly manipulative.
It argues that these men fake their entire worldview to gain proximity to women. They pretend to be ardent male feminists, they march in protests they don't care about, they vote Democrat, they feign intense outrage online to defend women from the vague threat of toxic masculinity.
Because the underlying psychology is a covert contract. The simp believes that if he provides enough validation, if he signals that he is utterly harmless and perfectly aligned with a woman's stated political beliefs, she will eventually reward him with intimacy.
Like putting coins in a vending machine.
Exactly. The author views this as a profound lack of integrity. They don't actually believe the ideology. They are just utilizing it as a camouflage to get laid.
And the darkest twist in the author's theory is that this elaborate, soul-crushing camouflage doesn't even work.
Like, it completely fails.
Right. Women might happily accept the validation, the favors, and the emotional support from the simp, but when it comes time to actually sleep with someone, they abandon the nudely armed soy boy entirely. Because who do they actually want? They want the exact opposite of the simp. They want the T-Rash.
Oh, the T-Rash phenomenon. This is where the text gets incredibly granular.
Yes, it does.
The T-Rash is the unapologetic monster that women willingly throw every single one of their stated standards away for.
And the specificity of these archetypes is wild.
Yeah.
You have the ghetto thug drug dealer. He has no job, no future. He can't even pronounce basic financial terms like IRA, but he somehow has 3 different women paying his rent, fighting over him, and bailing him out of jail on a Tuesday afternoon.
Or you have the white-collar equivalent, the roided-out finance bro. He has a leased BMW he can barely afford, the requisite Patagonia vest, a boat drowning in debt, and he is actively losing billions of dollars in private equity while under investigation by the SEC.
And then the absolute pinnacle of this theory, the 33-year-old veil ski bum. This is where the sheer absurdity of human behavior just breaks my brain. It is fucking insane how these guys operate.
It really is.
The author paints this picture of a guy who lives in an alley behind a failed restaurant, talks endlessly about the virtues of socialism, smells heavily of patchouli, and literally survives because bored trophy wives are sneaking out to buy him $18 artisanal sandwiches.
Well, the author uses these highly extreme, almost comedic archetypes to illustrate a core mechanical rule in his framework. Because what do the thug, the fraudulent finance bro, and the vagrant ski bum all have in common?
They're a mess.
Right, they are broke, they are highly chaotic, and they are objectively terrible partners, but they share one defining trait. They are exceptionally physically hot.
And because they are that hot, the women completely disregard the red flags.
All of them.
They don't care if he's cheating on them with 5 other women. They don't care about his politics. They don't care that he's a criminal.
To explain this mechanism, the text uses a really sharp physics analogy. It compares male physical attractiveness to critical mass in a nuclear reaction.
Okay, break that down.
In normal circumstances, physics behaves predictably. But if you gather enough plutonium atoms in one place, you hit critical mass, all the normal rules of the room vanish and the bomb detonates.
Whoa.
Exactly. The author argues that T-Rash hits a biological critical mass of hotness. Once a man crosses that specific threshold of physical appeal, all the behavioral rules, all the moral standards, all the feminist ideology that women claim to care about, it all completely evaporates. The biology overrides the brain.
Damn. Now, you might hear this cynical, ruthless view of the secular dating market and wonder, how on earth does this apply to religion?
Right, that's the pivot.
Because logically, a Christian man seeing this chaos would just think, well, I'll opt out. I'll go to a traditional church, find a nice conservative girl, and bypass this whole nightmare. But the author argues that the modern Western church is the absolute worst place you could possibly look.
He explicitly refers to the church dating pool as a sewer.
A sewer.
Yeah, and the mechanism he identifies here is selection bias. He claims that 90% of marriage-age women in modern churches are not actually there for profound theological reasons or for Jesus. They are there for ulterior motives, primarily to find a stable wallet.
The text actually calls it the sexless wallet.
Yes.
And the argument is that the church environment heavily rewards performative piety. So it naturally attracts women who have aged out of chasing the T-Rash, who now want the financial stability and societal respectability of a good Christian man, but who have absolutely zero genuine physical attraction to him.
It's framed as an elaborate trap. A woman uses the lure of traditional biblical marriage to lock down a man's income stream. She plays the role of the demure, modest Christian girl. But the second the ring is on her finger and the legal contract is signed, the sex completely dries up. The bait and switch is complete, and the man finds himself trapped in a miserable, legally binding roommate situation where he is constantly having to beg and negotiate for basic intimacy.
Listening to this, I mean, it feels like trying to catch a prize fish in a radioactive sewer. Sure, theoretically, a genuinely good, physically attracted Christian woman might exist in that congregation.
Sure.
But the environment is so heavily polluted by bad actors and manipulative social dynamics that your odds of finding her are near zero, and you are far more likely to just poison yourself trying to navigate the sludge.
Which leads to the author's highly counterintuitive conclusion, right? A Christian man is statistically far better off pursuing a secular girl than a church girl.
Which is a claim that sounds completely unhinged if your stated goal is building a Christian family.
It does, until you look at the underlying logic, which is entirely about honesty. The text argues that a secular girl might be completely steeped in modern hookup culture, but at least she operates in reality.
She tells you who she is.
Exactly. She is honest about who she is, what she wants, and what she finds attractive. The church girl, according to this framework, is actively hiding her true motivations behind a veil of sacred religion. She is weaponizing God to secure a lifestyle.
Wow.
And the author believes that foundational dishonesty is the most toxic possible start to a marriage.
But the author doesn't just blame the women in the pews. Like, he argues the entire ecosystem is poisoned because the leadership is completely compromised. He goes incredibly hard on modern pastors.
Oh, he really does.
He calls them hippie douches.
Yeah.
He says you walk into a church expecting to hear the Bible, and instead you get a Marxist-laden rant about wealth redistribution from a guy wearing skinny jeans who looks homeless.
Yeah.
He claims a massive percentage of American churches are really just doing unpaid PR for the Democrat Party.
And if we tie this back to the evolutionary strategies we discussed earlier, the author is essentially arguing that these pastors are running macro-level sneaky fucker game from the pulpit.
That's
right. They have abandoned rigorous, challenging theology in favor of virtue-signaling leftism, because that is what is popular with the female congregants. They know women drive church attendance and tithing, so the pastors prioritize political pandering over divine truth to maintain their own status and income.
holy shit. So the dating pool is corrupted by financial predators, the leadership is corrupted by political pandering, and this rot has infected the entire mindset of the modern Christian.
Which brings us to the section of the text that I found the most piercing.
Yeah, this part is brutal.
The author identifies what he considers the ultimate coward's shield in modern religion. 5 simple words. The Lord has a plan.
The text just drips with seething disdain for this phrase.
It really does.
The author categorizes the people who constantly use it as fatists and outright liars. The sociological critique here is that modern Christians have taken a profound theological concept, the sovereignty of God, and completely weaponized it to avoid personal accountability, agency, and the painful consequences of their own action. They don't want a relationship with the divine. They just want a cosmic excuse for their own crippling laziness.
Exactly.
And the text gives these brutally specific, almost uncomfortable examples of how this plays out in real life.
The specificity of the examples is what makes the argument land so hard. You have the classic Christian girl in the young adult singles group. She desperately wants to marry a guy named Derek.
Okay.
But she absolutely refuses to put down the snacks, get on a treadmill, and lose the 50 pounds required for Derek to actually find her physically attractive. Unsurprisingly, Derek never asks her out. Does she take responsibility for her health and physical presentation? No. She sighs and tells her friends, the Lord has a plan.
And then you have the male equivalent.
Right.
The guy who never hits the gym, who has zero personality traits beyond just being a nice guy, and who is completely terrified to ask a woman on a date. He sits in his apartment smoking pot all day to manage his self-diagnosed social anxiety. He acquires zero trade skills, puts zero effort into the job market, and eventually gets rejected for a third-shift security guard position. Is it because he's a lazy coward refusing to engage with the world? No. He nods solemnly and says, the Lord has a plan.
But the most extreme example the author provides is the washed-up, bankrupt OnlyFans creator.
Oh, this one is wild.
A woman who decided she didn't want to do math, she didn't want to learn a trade, and she didn't want to do manual labor. So she took the easy route and sold explicit pictures of herself online. She makes serious money for a while, but instead of paying her taxes or paying off her student loans, she blows all the cash on drugs, luxury bags, and partying.
And then reality hits.
Exactly. Eventually, she ages out, her fans leave, the income completely dries up, and she's forced to file for bankruptcy. So what does she do? She pivots. She joins a church, rebrands as a saved trad wife, and suddenly she doesn't have to grow up, acquire actual skills, or face her financial ruin because Jesus forgives, and of course, the Lord has a plan.
It is a complete abdication of living in reality. But what elevates this from just being an angry, cynical rant to a fascinating critique is the theological argument the author makes here.
Yeah.
He argues that using God to excuse your own stagnation isn't just a practical failure, it is an active affront to God. He draws a direct comparison to the parable of the talents in the Bible.
And the theological mechanics of that parable fit his argument perfectly.
How so?
Well, in the story, a master gives his servants coins talents. The servants who take risks, invest the money, and multiply their coins are praised and rewarded. But the servant who is paralyzed by fear, who digs a hole and hides his coin in the dirt just to keep it safe, is harshly punished and cast out.
Right.
The author's interpretation is that God gave you a physical, secular life to live. You have a body, a mind, and an environment to conquer. Sitting around coasting through life, too cowardly to face the harsh realities of the gym, the job market, or the brutal secular dating pool is basically slapping God in the face.
You cannot hide behind a selective reading of the Bible to avoid the responsibility of playing the game of life.
Exactly.
So looking at this massive sweeping architecture the author has built, from the ancestral biological imbalance to the sneaky simps and the T-Rash, through the radioactive church sewers, all the way to the cowards hiding behind theology, what is the ultimate synthesis here? Like, what is the core warning this text is trying to deliver to the listener?
The overarching synthesis of the text is the assertion that there is a concerted, unified front actively working to suppress and shame the natural male sex drive.
He's outlining a cultural matrix basically designed to keep men docile.
Yes. The author firmly believes that modern feminists, compromised progressive pastors, tradcon mommy bloggers, and society at large all have a massive vested interest in making men feel inherently guilty for their biology.
Yeah.
They want men to feel ashamed for being visually stimulated, for desiring a physically fit partner, and for wanting straightforward physical intimacy without having to jump through endless manipulative emotional hoops.
And his advice to men caught in this system is surprisingly simple, but incredibly ruthless. Walk away.
Walk away and stop participating in the lie. He advises men to honor a woman's sovereignty. If a woman isn't interested in you physically, leave her alone. Do not hover around hoping she changes her mind.
Right.
But even more importantly, he demands that men honor their own self-respect. The text lays down a hard rule. If you find yourself having to constantly negotiate or plead or pull teeth to get basic intimacy from your wife or your girlfriend, you need to wake up and recognize reality. She just isn't into you.
Because if she actually was attracted to you, she would act exactly like those women act around the T-Rash. There would be no negotiation necessary.
Precisely. The author argues that the only way to break this generational cycle of sexless, miserable marriages and pathetic simping is for men to withdraw their participation. Stop pursuing women who view your physical touch as a chore to be endured. Stop attending and tithing to churches that actively shame your biological imperatives. And stop apologizing for desiring the exact same physical connection that every living organism on the planet is biologically driven to want.
Which pulls us right back to the very beginning, to that insane, viral, explosive opening quote about the porn epidemic ending when women just face reality and physically desire their husbands.
Yeah, full circle.
When we started, that quote sounded like pure provocation. Just a guy throwing a Molotov cocktail for internet clout.
I mean, it absolutely is a provocation, but when you map out the entire architecture beneath it, you realize it is the foundational thesis statement of his entire worldview.
Right.
It is the deeply held belief that the systems we consider normal, modern, digital dating, progressive church culture, socially acceptable gender roles, are all just elaborate, comfortable lies designed to obscure incredibly uncomfortable biological truths.
And that leaves you with a final thought to really mull over. If you entertain this author's grim, entirely unfiltered view of human nature as the truth, then the most radical, genuinely rebellious thing a man can do in the modern era isn't to be a pious, rule-following, nice guy sitting quietly in a church pew waiting for his reward.
Oh.
It's to demand absolute, unapologetic reality over the comforting, socially mandated lies we tell ourselves about love, biology, and faith.